Well, Adrian, Pelosi is starting this conference by talking about the order of business, which we have before us today on the House floor, which is debate and voting on this war powers resolution. This is a Democratic resolution that Pelosi laid out, which is in response to what she called, and she repeated these comments just now again, what she calls the disproportionate and provocative actions of President Trump when he ordered the drone strike that killed Soleimani. Now, this resolution seeks to end U.S. military hostilities toward Iran within 30 days unless Trump goes back to Congress and receives congressional approval. Of course, Democrats are citing the U.S. Constitution that says the power to make war is one that is shared equally between the two branches, the executive and the legislative. Well, the debate hasn't quite started on this measure. It is expected in the coming hour or so, and then a vote by the end of the day here in Washington. And because the House is controlled by Democrats, this war powers resolution is expected to pass. Now, the Senate is looking at a very similar measure. They're not officially debating it yet, but we also heard statements from senators today and yesterday regarding that. And what's notable, Adrian, is that there were at least two senators yesterday who were saying, these are Republican senators, who said that they would support this Senate war powers resolution. They came to that conclusion after getting the intelligence briefing on what Trump's intelligence was before he made that call to kill General Soleimani. And those two Republican senators said that they were insulted by the briefing because it offered so little information and did not allow them to debate. They said that was the executive branch taking too much of the pie, really trying to cut out Congress in enacting its due power, which is the co-equal power of Congress to make war. And so we know that at least two Republican senators have said they would support this resolution that really would handcuff the president going forward to limiting these military aggressions against Iran to 30 days unless Congress says otherwise.
Heidi, many thanks indeed. Heidi Zhou-Castro on Capitol Hill. Not so far away is our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett, who's with us now. What does the president think of these efforts to curb his war powers, Kimberly?
He doesn't like it very much, and he's letting us know about it on Twitter. The U.S. president pushing back on that debate taking place in the House of Representatives to limit his ability to respond militarily to any sort of threat from Iran or for him to act unilaterally without congressional approval. Here's what he writes. Hope that all House Republicans will vote against crazy Nancy Pelosi's war powers resolution. Also, remember her speed and rush in getting the impeachment hoax voted on and done. Well, she never sent the articles to the Senate. Just another Democrat fraud, presidential harassment. It's not presidential harassment. It's constitutionally mandated, particularly when it comes to the discussion of war. It must be debated. It must be something that this is discussed and approved by Congress. So the U.S. president can push back, but the reality is that this is a law and he has no more power than the U.S. Congress.
He's not the only one pushing back. His vice president is doing it too.
Yeah, and as Heidi Zhou-Castro mentioned there have been briefings that have been taking place on Capitol Hill, and it's not just Democrats that don't like those briefings that have been coming from the president's top security advisors. It's also some members of his own Republican Party. They feel a couple of things haven't happened. They haven't justified that strike on General Soleimani. They also say that this assassination in no way was imminent. At least they haven't seen the evidence of that. Vice President Mike Pence is saying, yeah, we can't show you the evidence, but you're going to have to trust us.
If we were to share all of the intelligence, and in fact, some of the most compelling evidence that Qassem Soleimani was preparing an imminent attack against American forces and American personnel also represents some of the most sensitive intelligence that we have. It could compromise those sources and methods. So look,
even in a classified setting.
I have tremendous respect for Senator Mike Lee. I recognize he's had a difference of opinion with our administration over self-defense measures the president authorized in Yemen. But look, we'll welcome those debates going forward. But I can assure your viewers that those of us that have seen all the evidence, that saw the evidence in real time, know that President Trump made the right decision to take Qassem Soleimani off the battlefield. America is safer. The world is safer.
Unfortunately, those assurances aren't sitting well with many members of Congress, because the fact is that many remember a generation ago when similar arguments were made about the threat of weapons of mass destruction in Iraq using intelligence that couldn't be shared. Well, that invasion took place only later for Americans to find out that intelligence was, in fact, flawed.
Our White House correspondent Kimberly Halkett reporting live there from Washington. Kimberly, many thanks indeed. Joseph Ura is an associate professor of political science at Texas A&M University in Qatar. He's with me here in the studio. What do you make of that language by the president there? Presidential harassment, he's calling it.
Well, President Trump makes a habit of maximizing sort of the scope of domestic political conflict, of sort of exaggerating the degree to which normal political debate between Republicans and Democrats is sort of a unique attack against him. Presidents of both parties have had Congress push back on their decisions as commander-in-chief and what is sort of a normal domestic debate about a military action. Of course, the president casts in these extreme terms.
I mean, he must be aware that as far as the executive branches of power are concerned, he's equal to Congress here.
Well, again, President Trump has sort of shown time and again that maybe the intricacies of the constitutional system are not especially important to him. And I think just as a matter of his rhetoric, he is apt to say that he has unilateral authority when, in fact, the constitutional system gives Congress a role to constrain the president.
So what if Congress does, as expected, vote to constrain the president today? What happens then?
Well, of course, the measure would need to go to the Senate and pass there, where the Republicans hold a majority. I've heard news that Senator Paul from Kentucky, Senator Lee from Utah may join Democrats, but it remains to be seen whether a majority can be cobbled together there. If the measure dies in the Senate, then presumably President Trump would interpret that as having a free hand to continue to do what he wanted in Iraq with respect to Iran.
OK, but if it does, by some fluke, pass, is President Trump able to ignure it once it passes?
Well, I mean, he will be able
order?
to veto it, right, as he did with the War Powers Resolution with respect to Yemen just this last spring. So Congress does have this authority, but as with all things it's shared, Congress has other tools at its disposal, right? They can use their power to control the federal budget, to maybe withhold funding for war in Iran, with Iran. This is a classic case of conflict in the separation of powers in American government.